Okay, students, this is for those who want to look at a brief review before you take the exam. Remember that if you are busy during the holiday, to take it beforehand because you won't be able to take it after. It's already open. The quiz is open. The pre-assignment will open as soon as you take the test. Okay, aqueous humor, vitreous humor. These are in the eye. The aqueous humor is that fluid in the eye in front of the lens. The vitreous humor is that jelly-like mass behind the lens. If you have not watched the dissection that's on the content page, watch that. You can see that jelly-like mass. Endolymph and perilymph. These are the fluids in the ear. And so we have that endolymph specifically in the cochlear duct and then in the semicircular canals. Cerumen is earwax. Okay. White matter and gray matter. White matter is myelinated fibers. Gray matter is unmyelinated. White matter in the brain is deeper, and gray matter is more superficially located. And the reverse is the case in the spinal cord. The gray matter is more internal. White matter is more external. Ventricles are the fluid filled spaces in the brain. Now, there are ventricles obviously in the heart. Again, those are fluid filled spaces, but we're talking about here in the brain. Okay. Our true and false questions. I'm going to zoom in a bit and look at a few of these. I won't answer all of them, but I want you to have time to get them down. Let's start with the first one. True or false, the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems are divisions of the somatic nervous system. So you need to go back through and look at, you got the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, the peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves that extend from the brain and the spinal cord. Then the peripheral nervous system is further divided into what? Sensory and motor, right? And then motor is further divided into what? Somatic and autonomic. And then autonomic is further divided into sympathetic, parasympathetic. So this is false. And this will be autonomic. Okay. I won't answer the one about the vagus. I need you to go back to your 12 cranial nerves and figure out what the vagus is responsible for, or which one is responsible for hearing and equilibrium. It may or may not be the vagus, but you can look at that a couple different ways. Same thing here with the neuroglial cells. Microglial cells, what are they for? The satellite cells, what are they for? So I want you to go back and take a look at those. Let's look at this next one. The muscle spindle and Golgi tendon are specialized proprioceptors designed to detect, movement and stretch. That's true. That's true. We talked about muscle spindle and Golgi tendon rather, when we talked about the muscle. And so they give us information about movement and placement in space and time. So those are proprioceptors. Yes. Okay, let's move this down a bit. The third ventricle is an air-filled space located between the brainstem and the cerebellum. So first of all, we know this is false because we know that the third ventricle is fluid-filled, right? Then the third ventricle is not between the brainstem and the cerebellum. The third ventricle is between the two cerebral hemispheres. So what's located between the brainstem and the cerebellum? That's actually the fourth ventricle. So the fourth ventricle is fluid filled. All ventricles are fluid filled. And the fourth ventricle is located between the brainstem and the cerebellum. Okay. Let's see here. The tympanic membrane passes vibrations to the inner ear by directly stimulating vibrations of the semicircular canals. Well, that's false. The semicircular canals don't vibrate. Fluid moves through them, but they don't vibrate. So what are we stimulating here? The ossicles. right? The ossicles lie against the tympanic membrane and the oval window, and then they move, and that vibration is sent inward. Okay, so I won't answer this next one we just did about the peripheral nervous system. And then I won't answer the one at the bottom. The process of smell is called gustation. The process of taste is called olfaction. Well, you know, olfactory, right? That's our first nerve. You know what that's for. So then you can answer that question. Okay, I'll go back out and you can see all of them at one time. Okay, what are these cranial nerves for? 3, 6, 4, 12, 8, and 10. So you need to know these in order, right? That O to touch and feel, very good velvet, which is the AH, right? And so 3, ocular motor. I'm just going to type the names in and you're going to go back and look at that brief description of what they're responsible for. Change this. 3 is ocular motor. 6 is abducens. 4 is trochlear. 12, hypoglossal. 8, vestibular cochlear. And 10 is vagus. Okay, so give the name and the brief description of the function of the following cranial nerve. So I gave the name. Go back and check the descriptions. So you do need to know these Roman numerals. So this is 3. This is 6. This is 4. The V is 5. So if there's a number after it, that is plus. If there's a number before it, that is minus. So X is 10, same thing. If there are numbers after it, that's plus. If it's numbers before it, that's minus. So this is 12. And then this is 8. 8 is interesting because you can have the V and 3 numbers behind it, or you can have the X and 2 numbers before it. This is 8, and this is 10. Draw a neuron and all the parts of it. We have done that a number of times before. I will just quickly draw one. I won't label it, but you should be familiar with all the parts, right? So if we had labels, these are the things that you would label. Okay. Okay. Discuss and describe the physical differences between the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems and what are the general differences in function. I'm going to give you a minute to think about that one. Let's make a little table. Okay. So, where does the sympathetic system arise from? What about the parasympathetic system? What is that first nerve, the preganglionic fiber? Is it long? Is it short? What this is transmitter. What neurotransmitter is released there? Second nerve, the post ganglionic nerve fiber. Is it long? Is it short? What neurotransmitter is released from there? And then the general function of that system. Okay. So I'm going to leave the table. I want you to look at that. I won't fill it in written in a written fashion, but I'll say it and then you can go back and fill it in. So the parasympathetic system arises from the thoracic and lumbar regions of the spinal cord. The parasympathetic arises from the cranial and sacral regions of the spinal cord, or cranial and sacral nerves, let's say that. And then the first nerve or neuron in the preganglionic fiber for sympathetic is fairly short. It releases acetylcholine. For parasympathetic, it's very long and it releases acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter. And the second nerve, the postganglionic fiber for the sympathetic system, is fairly long and it releases epinephrine or norepinephrine. And for the parasympathetic system, it is fairly short. Or no, let's not say fairly short. It's very short, really inside of the organ itself or the tissue itself, and it releases acetylcholine. So then the question is, what does that norepinephrine and acetylcholine do? So the sympathetic system is referred to as the fight or flight system. So it's going to increase blood pressure, increase ventilation, increase heart rate. For the parasympathetic system, it's called the rest and digest system. So what is it going to do? Decrease all of those things. Okay. So go back and visit that. Okay. The 3 steps by which the nervous system works. This was the very beginning of the notes. And it really doesn't matter whether we're talking about a reflex or some higher level process. That's it. Sensory input integration. What does that input mean? And then developing a motor output in response. Sometimes it's as simple as a reflex. You don't even have to think about it. You touch something hot, that comes in, that afferent pathway, which is our dorsal root. You know it's the dorsal root because you got the dorsal root ganglion. Come in, the synapses in the gray matter. You might have an interneuron or association neuron or not. Then you synapse with the motor neuron that's going out. That's the efferent pathway, and that's the motor output. That's for a reflex. I touch something hot, I don't even have to think about it. I pull away. It could be something higher level thinking. I see a stop sign, right? That is my sensory input. And then I remember, right, in my learning how to drive, that seeing a stop sign means I need to put my foot on the brake. That's the integration. The motor output is then I decide to put my foot on the brake. Same thing. That's the 3-step process. Okay, what are the muscles around the eye? There's 6. So I want you to think about those for a second. What are those? I won't list them, but there are 4 rectus muscles, 2 oblique muscles. The rectus muscles move the eye in the direction of the name of the muscle. The oblique muscles move the eye in the opposite direction of the name of the muscle and laterally. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute to think about the responsibility of each of these receptors. Okay, touch receptors and neck and nerve endings we saw in the skin, right? Touch receptors, you got light touch and deep touch receptors, the Pacinian corpuscles, Meissner's corpuscles, free nerve endings or neck and nerve endings were in the skin as well, associated with pain. We already talked about the muscle spindle and Golgi tendon. They're in muscles for detecting movement and stretch, right? The rods and the cones are photoreceptors. They detect light. Rods are for black and white night vision and peripheral vision. Cones are for color vision. You have 3 different types of cones. Mechanoreceptors detect physical change. And so you saw those with regards to hearing and balance. You had those hair cells in the semicircular canals. You had those hair cells in the vestibule, in the utricle and the saccule with the otolithic membrane and the otoliths. And then you had hair cells projecting from that basilar membrane in the organ of Corti for hearing. And then chemoreceptors you had for smell and taste, right? And it requires a fluid environment for those molecules to dissolve so that you can perceive either taste or smell. Okay, I'm going to list the neuroglial cells, and you're going to then come back and give the responsibility of them. I think that's it. I can't think of any other one. Schwann cells, oligodendrocytes secrete myelin. Astrocytes create the blood-brain barrier. Microglial cells are phagocytic and engulf dead cells. Satellite cells are protective. Oh, I forgot one. Ependymal cells line the fluid-filled spaces. Okay. The meninges, the 3 layers, I won't even tell you. These are the layers that surround the brain and the spinal cord, right? Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the models. We have done this a number of times. And I'm not going to label them. I want you to label them. I'm going to give you a moment to look at these and do that. Okay. What are these areas? The areas are called what? Lobes. And this is of the cerebrum. What can you name there? Okay. Occipital lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, frontal lobe. Occipital lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, frontal lobe. So the next picture is going to be the same thing, but open. So let's do the lobes first. I'm not going to say them, you are. And let's see what you said. You say frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe. I hope so. Okay, so now what we're going to do is zoom in and look at some structures and spaces inside. Okay, so first of all, what is this whole thing? What is that whole thing? What is this whole thing? And then more specifically, what is this? What is this? What is this space? What is this space? What is this space? Don't forget on the test, when I give you a qualifier and I say identify number 6, the wall, identify letter A, the space. You need to look at that. Don't rush through so quickly until you're not reading that. That costs you unnecessary points. Because I noticed the answer, and I noticed if you had just read that little qualifier next to it, you would have got that right. I'm going to give you a minute to think about all of those. Okay, so this space is the third ventricle. Now the wall is the thalamus. So let me come in here with my pencil. So you have the thalamus, you have the hypothalamus, and you have the epithalamus. These are areas here. But the wall here makes up the third ventricle. The ventricle is a space where the two halves come together. Then this is the cerebral aqueduct that leads to the fourth ventricle. And the fourth ventricle is between the brainstem and the cerebellum. So this is the cerebellum, this is the brainstem. The parts of the brainstem are the pons and the medulla. Okay. This is called the corpus callosum. It holds the two hemispheres together. This is a thin membrane called the septum pellucidum. And if I pierce it, I can see the lateral ventricle. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this tiny bit. And I want you to look at these cranial nerves. I'm not going to go through them because you have these models on the discussion board and you can see you got Roman numerals here, right? On one side. On the other side, you don't have the Roman numerals. So you can make that comparison and identify these things on this side because that's what you're going to see on the test. So I'm going to erase all those lines and just give you a minute to look at that and see how many of these you can answer. They go in order from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if you follow back in order, you can. It's easier to identify them that way. And there are a number of models, same thing. We already did this. This is another view of some of those cranial nerves. We did the lobes. We know the cerebellum. This is the pituitary sticking out down here. And you can see a number of these different cranial nerves from the side too. I believe this picture is also on the discussion board. Okay, so the raised area is called the gyrus. The depression is called the sulcus. This here is the longitudinal fissure that separates the two hemispheres. And then when we separate a pre and post, this is the pre-central gyrus, this is the post-central gyrus, this is the central sulcus. Okay. Pre-central gyrus, post-central gyrus, central sulcus. It's not even on either side, but post, pre, central sulcus. Same thing we looked at before, the cranial nerves. And this is showing you some of them coming off here. Same thing. Okay. This white inside of the cerebellum is called the arbor vitae. Arbor vitae. This right here, you would find this here, this blue network of blood vessels here. You'd find one here, and you'd find one inside of here. Each one of those is called a choroid plexus. And the choroid plexus is responsible for producing the cerebral spinal fluid. This just highlights gray matter and white matter. Gray matter in the brain is more towards the outside, so you can see that it's darker on the outside, and then the white matter is towards the inside. Don't worry about all the things this is pointed to. And they've stained this one here so you can clearly see the gray matter towards the outside, the white matter towards the inside. Um, this just shows that choroid plexus, the things we looked at on the other model. Okay, these are the ventricles. I am going to label or put pointers, and you're going to label. Okay, lateral ventricle. Maybe I need a bigger dot. Lateral ventricle, third ventricle, fourth ventricle, cerebral aqueduct. The next picture is similar, just from a different view. Lateral ventricle, third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle. And this is a close-up so you can see that third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle, lateral ventricle. Spinal cord. I'm going to zoom in and put some markers, and you're going to label. So label those things. Okay, central canal in the center here. That's a fluid filled space running through the spinal cord. Dorsal root ganglion, and the ventral root and the dorsal root join up and give you the spinal nerve. Okay, just a different view. Okay, I think I got some closer up pictures. What are these two groups? What are those groups? Okay, so each one is a plexus. And what you need to think about is what comes off of the plexus. Now, there are a number of nerves that come off each one. And at this point, I'm not really concerned about you knowing every single nerve that comes off of every plexus. However, there are some important ones that come off of each one that I do want you to know. And so what is that important one that comes off of the cervical plexus? What is that important nerve that comes off of the cervical plexus? I'm not going to tell you. I want you to think about it for a minute. We didn't even name a bunch of nerves that came off of there, but we named an important one that comes off of there. What was that one? The phrenic nerve. What does the phrenic nerve do? P-H-R-E-N-I-C. What does that phrenic nerve do? You remember? That phrenic nerve goes down to the diaphragm, that muscle that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, and it allows that diaphragm to contract so that we can breathe. So that one is super important. The brachial plexus gives rise to ulnar nerve, median nerve, musculocutaneous nerve, radial nerve, the nerves that innervate the arm. Axillary nerve. Okay, and then we're going to go down. Next picture to the plexi that come off lower. So let's zoom in for a minute. We'll name those. I'm labeling a couple things here I want you to identify. I'll give you a minute. Excuse me. So that arrow is pointing to the cauda equina, which means horse's tail. So the spinal cord stops being a cord and becomes a bundle of nerves here. Okay, lumbar plexus and sacral plexus. What I'm going to do, I don't like the color of that, so I'm going to change it just so there's a little bit more contrast here. I like that one. Okay. So now I'm going to zoom in and label a few specific nerves. Okay. That gives more information. We want to label this one. We want to label this one. We want to label this one, this one, and then I'm going to have to move down to label the other ones. Okay, so this is on the thumb side. So this is radial. Right here is radial nerve. Okay, because it's on the thumb side. This is on the pinky side. So this is ulnar nerve. Okay. This one is the one I was talking about here. This is coming off the lumbar plexus, and it's going to make its way down over the femur. That's the femoral nerve. This one coming off of the sacral plexus here, this is the sciatic nerve. I didn't label that. That's the sciatic nerve. Or maybe that's what I was labeling here. That's, you know what, that's what I wanted here. So, but we'll go back. We'll stick with femoral right here because that is the femoral. This is the sciatic nerve. It comes off this sacral plexus right here, and it runs down to the back of the leg. This, let's move it down. I don't want to even name. I'm glad I moved it down. Let's put some more arrows back on here. I want to name this, which we did. I do want to name that. I'm sorry. I want to name that. We want to name this. I'll put it over here, and we want to name this. So we named that one before, and I'm going to put the names on here. This is the sciatic nerve. This is the obturator nerve. And the obturator nerve goes through this obturator foramen, which is hard to see. Okay. And then this is the saphenous nerve. The saphenous runs medial and superficial. And when you get to 153, there's a vein that runs there too. And it's also called saphenous. And then this is femoral nerve. Now, I didn't put nerve, but you should put nerve for each one of these. Okay. Let me see. Okay, I think we're good on that. Okay. Let's go to some of these. Okay, I'm going to draw some lines, and you are going to do some identification. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute. I want you to think about what those things are. Superior rectus muscle, lateral rectus muscle, medial rectus muscle, inferior oblique muscle. Do those again. Superior rectus muscle, lateral rectus muscle, medial rectus muscle, inferior oblique muscle. Okay. Then the white part is called the sclera, which is the fibrous tunic. And this transparent part is the cornea. Okay. Give you a minute. Cornea. This is the superior oblique. It has a tendon that runs under here, and then the muscle loops around here. Okay, so that's superior oblique. This is the optic nerve. This is the inferior rectus muscle down here. Okay. Cornea, superior oblique, optic nerve, inferior rectus. This outer layer here, no, let me not say outer layer. We've removed the outer layer. The outer layer was white. This is the middle layer. This is the choroid layer, also called the nutritive tunic. This blue, the part that makes up the color of the eye, is the iris. Okay, so this choroid. Colored part of the eye, iris. What about this opening in the middle? Pupil. Okay. This ball that's transparent inside represents that vitreous humor. Let's just put some lines on here. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Give you a minute to answer those. Okay. Vitreous humor. The lens, we hadn't talked about the lens before. Ciliary body, we hadn't talked about that before. Sclera, we talked about that. Optic nerve, we talked about that. Vitreous humor, lens, ciliary body, sclera, optic nerve. Okay, this is inside, right? So we looked at the choroid layer, which was brown and it had the blood vessels running through it. This inner layer here is the retina. This is the optic nerve, but where it comes in is the optic disc. Then over here is the macula lutea, and in the center of that will be the fovea centralis. This edge here, scalloped edge, that's the ora serrata. This is the ciliary body. Go back over those. Optic nerve, optic disc, macula lutea. This is the retina, ora serrata, ciliary body. We looked at this already. Okay. So the parts of the ear, I'm going to put some lines. I'm going to give you a minute to work through those. So all, excuse me, all of this outer ear is the auricle or pinna. Just pick one. Don't say auricle parentheses pinna or pinna slash auricle. Just pick one. Auricle or pinna is all of that outer ear. And then we go into the ear via this external acoustic meatus, external auditory canal. I'll take any of those. Then we got the internal auditory canal or eustachian tube or auditory tube here. We got the tympanic membrane here. The ossicles collectively are sitting against it. We'll name them individually in a little bit. Then we got the cochlea and then the semicircular canals. Let's zoom in on this picture. I think I have a different view, better view, but so here's my tympanic membrane. These are my ossicles. These are the semicircular canals. This is the cochlea. Okay. And this is that close up. So this is my tympanic membrane right here. These, excuse me, are the ossicles. Malleus, and you can remember incus, stapes, MIS, and just go from the tympanic membrane to the inner ear here. So we got malleus, incus, stapes. And then this area is the vestibule. This is the cochlea. These are the semicircular canals. This is the vestibular cochlear nerve. Let us do this. Tympanic membrane, malleus, incus, stapes, vestibule, cochlea, semicircular canals, vestibular cochlear nerve. Tympanic membrane, malleus, incus, stapes, semicircular canal, vestibule, cochlear, vestibular cochlear nerve. Same thing, just up close. Okay. So then you have, this is in the inner ear, in the cochlea. You have these three spaces: scala vestibuli, scala tympani, scala media, or cochlear duct. We're going to focus on that. The scala media or cochlear duct is this middle part here. So that's the part we're going to focus on. We're going to zoom in on that. And the part that I really want you to focus on is this organ of Corti. So that's not the best box. This part that's in the box, that's the organ of Corti. Okay. And that's the part that allows us to hear. So we have this tectoral membrane, we have this basilar membrane, and we have these hair cells. These hair cells project into this tectoral membrane. This fluid-filled space, this space is the cochlear duct. It's filled with endolymph. And when fluid is moving through these spaces, this membrane, this basilar membrane, vibrates. And then it causes these hair cells to move within this tectoral membrane. And then you perceive sound. The information goes to the vestibular cochlear nerve, or the cochlear portion of that vestibular cochlear nerve. So the whole thing is the organ of Corti. This is the tectoral membrane. This is the basilar membrane. These are the hair cells. This is the ossicles up close. You could just see how tiny they are. And here is a good one. You can really see how tiny they are because this is on a dime. Okay, so the eye we've already done. Let's see. Yeah, I think we're good on that. Okay. What are those? And circumvallate papillae, fungiform papillae, foliate papillae. We'll look at these on a different model as well. Circumvallate, fungiform, foliate. And these things back here are tonsils, lingual tonsils, palatine tonsils. You don't have to know them yet. Okay. Next slide is where we have the other part. So this is a blow up of those papillae. These are circumvallate. These are fungiform. These are the foliate, and then the pointy ones are the filiform. We weren't able to see those before. So these are the filiform, the tiny pointy ones. The big round ones, circumvallate. The little round ones, fungiform. The kind of straight wrinkles, foliate, and the pointy ones, filiform. And I think that is it. Okay. So everything that you need is posted. When you're done with the test, the pre-assignment will open for the next one. If you run out of time, you're going to have to take this over the break. So I want you to, if you need to take it beforehand, let me not say if you run out of time, don't run out of time. If you need to take it beforehand because you got stuff going on for the holiday, that's perfectly fine. Do that. You will not be able to take it after the holiday. So what I need you to do is if you're going out of town or something like that, take it all beforehand and you'll be good to go. If not, Wednesday the quiz is due, Friday the test is due, and then when you come back Monday, your pre-assignment is due. Okay? If you have any questions, you can email me.